Hey everybody, welcome to the video. It's Tuesday, April 13th, and we're breaking down this monster 11-game slate that we have over on DraftKings, and that's a good one too. We have loads of good pitching. Almost every ace is pitching for the respective team today, so lots of decisions to be made at pitcher, but it's a fun one. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you guys are as well. And if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever new content is posted to this channel. You're going to follow me over on social media, handles in the bottom right corner of your screen. And if you want to support the channel over on Patreon, join a community of several hundred players. Links down below for that. You can get access to the Discord community, the projections, optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, datasheet, cheat sheets, all that fun stuff that I do update throughout the day. Link is down below for that. But I think that's it for the shameless plug. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as per usual, we'll start with the pitcher position, and there's other viable pitchers on the slate besides these four, but these are the ones I'm looking the most as of right now. I got two SP1s here and two SP2s that I think are massively underpriced, which leads to some decently heavy ownership. And if you're wondering what to do with pitcher today, either to double spend up or go spend up and then a mid-range or double mid-range, my personal opinion is that you should go one spend up and one mid-range pitcher. Now, you could obviously make either of the strategies work just depending on what kind of lineup you're going to build, but the bats aren't that great today. There's only a couple good spots for bats, and they are kind of expensive with the Astros and the Dodgers, which in my opinion are the best places to go today. Not a lot of great value bats out there, so in my opinion, I think going one spend up is better than going double spend up, because then you're going to have to really find some value bats, which I really don't think are that abundant today. And then if you're going to go double mid-range, you're missing out on an ace like Trevor Bauer or Shane Bieber that have 30-point upside anytime they take the mound. Now, those two guys have 30-point upside, but I just don't think it's as likely as a guy like Bieber or Bauer. So that's just kind of my opinion on the roster construction. But anyway, we'll start up top with Shane Bieber, $10,700. You guys know I'm an Indians fan, so anytime Shane Bieber's on the mound, I will pretty much recommend him for DraftKings purposes. But, you know, I might be a little bit biased there, but the guy just does not have bad starts, really, besides that playoff game versus the Yankees. But outside of that, the guy is just a machine. He started the year with 2 12-strikeout games. That's 24 strikeouts through 2 games so far, which I think I saw a stat that there's only 2 other pitchers in the league that's ever started the back-to-back seasons with like 12-plus strikeouts or something like that. I don't know the exact stat, but just to put it lightly, Shane Bieber is pretty good at pitching the baseball. You know, he's at 3.5 implied team total against him. Pretty much even for the win here. It is a tougher matchup versus Chicago White Sox. Does have an 8-strikeout prop over in Vegas. Now, my personal opinion is that I like Trevor Bauer over Shane Bieber today. And actually, last time these guys pitched, they were both on the same slate. And I said I liked Shane Bieber over Trevor Bauer. I ended up playing both together because the way the slate was, you could fit in 2 cheap pitchers. And I just love Bieber Bauer days, man. My 2 favorite pitchers in the league. So I'm definitely looking forward to watching some splendid pitching today. Should be definitely a treat to watch. But personally, I know Shane Bieber, he's an awesome pitcher. Had around a 40% K rate last year. It's just the matchup versus the Chicago White Sox. And I can't imagine the Indians are going to put up too many runs here versus Lucas Giolito. Their offense isn't that great these days. I know they got Jose Ramirez, Eddie Rosario. Those guys are fine. And some guys are fine versus lefties. But we have a righty on the mound and one of the better righties in the entire league in Giolito with the Chicago White Sox ace on the mound. So not really expecting the Indians to give Shane Bieber too much run support here. I feel like Trevor Bauer is way more likely to pick up a win versus the Rockies, since they have Antonio Sensatella on the mound. I think the Dodgers can definitely take care of business there. Plus, he's got a 74% chance for a win over in Vegas compared to Shane Bieber at 50%. So I'll take the extra win equity with Trevor Bauer, because that 4-point bonus can definitely mean a lot in DraftKings when you're kind of edging the line there. You need that little get me over. So I'm definitely liking Trevor Bauer a little bit more than Shane Bieber. I think most people would agree. So I think the majority of the people will go with Bauer. So if you want the tournament play, the tournament pivot off of the chalky pitcher at SP1 today, I think Shane Bieber is your guy, because he has all the upside in the world versus the White Sox. I'm just a little bit concerned if he's going to get that win, but because they got a pretty solid lineup. I know they're missing a couple of guys like Tim Anderson and Eloy Jimenez, which definitely softens up their lineup a little bit, but I like Shane Bieber. I mean, I still think he can get around 10 strikeouts in this game. Probably won't allow too many runs, maybe one or 2 runs, but outside of that, Shane Bieber should be just fine. It's just, I think everything points towards wanting to play Trevor Bauer. He started the year off with double-digit strikeouts in each start, had 10. He actually already faced the Rockies as one. It was in Coors Field, a much tougher place to pitch than it is in Dodger Stadium. But Rockies, I mean, that's the hardest stadium to pitch in, and he had a no-hit bid going for quite some time until I think he fell apart in the 6th or 7th inning, where he gave up a couple dongers and ended up giving up 4 runs, I believe. But still an overall really impressive day, around 24, 27 DraftKings points. I can't remember exactly, but then his next start versus Oakland, he absolutely crushed that one as well, 10 strikeouts. And as soon as I turned the game on, I think he gave up a solo shot, maybe to Matt Olson or something, I forget. But Trevor Bauer's numbers last year, pretty darn good, 1.73 ERA. To get a bit lucky, considering he had a 3.25 xFIP, but that's still pretty elite numbers, 36% K rate. Overall, really awesome numbers. He has an 8 strikeout prop over in Vegas, only a 2.9 implied team total against him with a monster chance for a win. He's a heavy favorite here, so everything points to wanting to play Trevor Bauer here over Shane Bieber, in my opinion, in cash games or single entry GPPs, because I tend to play those more so towards cash games when it comes to the pitchers. I'll still stack in those, but I like Trevor Bauer, the discount that we get with him, and I just feel like he's the overall better play today in a softer matchup versus the Colorado Rockies, who I will target in Coors Field, but outside of Coors Field, their lineup is pretty bad outside of Charlie Blackmon and Trevor Story, which he should be able to mow them down as well. So those are the two guys I like up top. I do prefer Bauer over Bieber today. And then dropping down to these SP2s and Luis Castillo and Brandon Woodruff to pair with one of our SP1s, but I feel like these guys are massively underpriced. I know the pricing is relative to the slate, and when we have a lot of really good up top pitchers like a Bieber, a Bauer, Lucas Giolito, those kind of guys, that they're going to price down some SP2s so we can actually make some lineups, but these guys should still be above 8K. I mean, Woodruff at $7,500, Luis Castillo almost in the 6K range. Just seems a little bit silly to me, but I can't complain. It's going to make building lineups a little bit easier for us. We can get some ace-level talent in that 7K range, so I guess I can't complain too much there. But we'll start with Brandon Woodruff, $7,500. He's facing the Chicago Cubs, who've been struggling versus righties so far to start the season. Freddie Peralta, his teammate, last night just struck out 10 of those guys around 30-some DraftKings points versus them, and I would not be surprised if Brandon Woodruff can put up a similar performance. And actually, his last start was versus the Chicago Cubs. He went 7 innings, only allowed 1 hit, struck out 8, and he only went 74 pitches. And I'm not liking the pitch count I'm seeing from Brandon Woodruff so far to start the year. His first outing, he went 78 pitches, and then his last outing versus the Cubs, like I just mentioned, he only went 74. So I'm not liking that trend. Hopefully, we can beef that up. But he was very efficient in his last start, and the Cubs, like I mentioned, have been struggling versus righties, and Woodruff has elite level stuff, a 31% K rate last season, didn't really walk too many guys, a 3.29 xFIP, high ground ball rate, 1 home run per 9 inning for the most part. I'm not too scared of this matchup versus the Cubs. I know it's a hitter-friendly park in Milwaukee, but I think Brandon Woodruff should be fine. His price is way too low in my opinion, so I think he's fine for either cash games or tournaments. And Luis Castillo, $7,100. This just feels like a massive underpricing in my opinion. Although I didn't mention something really quick. So I like to go over the Vegas numbers. Brandon Woodruff, he has a 3.7 implied team total against him, slight favorite, and a 7 strikeout prop over in Vegas. Anyway, back to Luis Castillo. He actually has similar numbers over in Vegas, a 3.78 implied team total against him. Slight underdog here versus the Giants, but a 7 strikeout prop over in Vegas. And actually some similar numbers to Luis Castillo, especially in the strikeout department, a 31% strikeout rate. Both are giving up a 130-some ISO. ERA 3.21, xFIP of 2.82. High ground ball rate. Castillo's got a near 60% ground ball rate, which I do like. Only 0.64 home runs per 9 innings. And I'm not too scared of the San Francisco Giants lineup. I know there's a couple good bats in there, but Luis Castillo should be fine at that price point. He is just massively underpriced, and I can't really understand why he's this cheap. I know his first game of the year versus St. Louis, he got absolutely shellacked for negative 15.1 fantasy points, but his next start versus Pittsburgh, which one of the easier matchups you can ask for, but he still was pretty good in that start. He went 7 innings, had 26.8 fantasy points, struck out 5 on 81 pitches. In his first 2 games, he hasn't really gone that deep into the game, 73 and 81 pitches. Now, the first game, got to keep in mind that he gave up 10 runs, 8 of those earned. He got absolutely murdered, so it makes sense he wouldn't go that deep into the game, but he was kind of cruising in his last one, so hopefully he can go a little bit deeper in this one, but at $7,100, you're just mainly playing him for the price tag, because he's got ace level stuff, a 31% K rate, so you can sign me up for these price points on these 2 pitchers. I feel like more people would go with Castillo just because of the lower price point, but I think you can easily make a case for Woodruff over Castillo, and if he's going to be lower owned than Luis Castillo, I mean, I think that just makes him even a better play, because I feel like their upside's pretty similar, and I would say Woodruff might actually have the better matchup strikeout-wise, but both guys are really solid plays here, and I do think Woodruff has a better chance of picking up the win as well, but can't go wrong with either, and these are the 4 pitchers I kind of like the most as of right now. But with that being said, I think we can move on to the bats. And as per usual, we will start with the catcher position and move around the diamond, then hit the outfield as well. Now, the one thing I want to say is that when there's a lot of good pitchers on the mound, all the aces are pitching, it's kind of hard to use bats because they're all in pretty bad spots for the most part. Now, there's a couple of teams that are in softer matchups compared to the field here, so it looks like we're going to be attacking them. Unfortunately, some of those SP2s are cheaper to be able to fit these guys in, but we'll talk through it. But the Dodgers, Astros, and the Rays are looking like the best spots to be right now. I feel like that's pretty much all the guys I have listed. Those kind of guys here, maybe had a couple one-offs, but we'll break it down a little bit. So Will Smith, $4,900, going up against Antonio Sensatella. That means the Dodgers have one of the best matchups in the entire slate. Because Antonio Sensatella, he's obviously not nearly as good as most of these other pitchers pitching on the slate. We got Jack Flaherty, Matthew Boyd. Even he's not even as good as Kyle Gibson, but we have all those aces on the slate as well. So Antonio Sensatella versus the best team in baseball is definitely a soft spot here. Now they're going to be without Cody Bellinger, which does hurt the lineup a bit, but they're still an overall amazing team. Will Smith, Corey Seager, Mookie Betts, AJ Pollock. I mean, it's still a loaded lineup. Justin Turner, the list goes on. So not too concerned here with the Dodgers. And Will Smith, he's great versus right-handed pitching. I prefer lefties versus Sensatella. He does have a pretty high ground ball rate to righties, but still not a great pitcher. Doesn't have a high strikeout rate. And Will Smith's numbers last season versus righties in a 97 plate appearance sample size, close to a 300 batting average, 350 ISO, 174 WRC plus, only a 16% K rate, a 49% fly ball rate, 41% hard contact rate, and OPS above 1,000. So if you got the money for Will Smith, or if you're just stacking up the Dodgers, I do think he's a very solid play there. And just two cheap catchers here. Martin Maldonado, $3,500. He's just a cheap option on one of the better stacks today. There's a lot of good batters on the Houston Astros that do hit lefties well, and Martin Maldonado, while he's not a great hitter, he's just a cheap part of that stack. Because I do imagine we're pretty heavy on the Astros today. They currently have the highest implied team total on the slate at 5.14, just edging out the Dodgers here. But looking at Maldonado's numbers versus lefties last season, it's not terrible. He will strike out quite a bit, but he had a 400 on base percentage, a 381 WOBA, 186 ISO, and a 148 WRC plus with a batting average of 279. So for a catcher, that's not that bad, and there should be some RBI opportunity being on one of the better teams to target today. Then if you want just an absolute punt catcher, we have Alex Avila at $2,100 versus Jack Flaherty. I think Jack Flaherty is a fantastic pitcher. I played him last time out. He did very well for me versus Miami, and they only have a 3.6 implied team total here, but he's $2,100. He does have some power versus right-handed pitching, and Jack Flaherty, while he is a good pitcher, will give up a little bit of lefty power. So if you're hunting a cheap home run from a catcher here, I think Alex Avila does make some sense. Looking at his numbers versus righties last season, they're not great. 40% K rate, which is terrible. 21% walk rate, which is really good. A 162 batting average. I mean, all these numbers are pretty bad. Does have a 340 on base percentage, though, and I guess that's the one bright spot for being $2,100. So he's fine just because of the price point. If you need an absolute punt catcher, especially if you're spending up for pitching today. Dropping out of first base, we have Max Muncie, $5,200. For reasons I kind of mentioned earlier, I do like lefties versus Antonio Sensatella, but you can play the entire Dodgers lineup here, and he should be betting cleanup, especially with Bellinger not in the lineup these days. So Max Muncie, he's got power versus both lefties and righties. Had a very low batting average last year, but he does have power versus either handedness at pitcher. And Sensatella will struggle with the lefties more so than the righties. If you want to look at Sensatella's splits, I kind of forgot to pull that up versus Will Smith. His numbers last season, a 73 inning sample size, xFIP close to 5, only a 14% K rate. Doesn't really walk too many guys and doesn't give up a ton of power, but he's going to give these guys a lot of pitches to hit. He doesn't really strike out too many guys whatsoever, and he doesn't walk many guys, so that means he's just kind of pounding the plate for the most part, and this is a team that can definitely take advantage of that, and they had a pretty good start versus him in Coors Field, if I remember correctly. I know that's Coors Field, so it's a completely different beast, but if you're looking at splits versus lefties, 8% walk rate, 11% K rate, 4.8 xFIP, and a 153 ISO given up with a 250 batting average. So while they're not the worst numbers in the world, it does have a decently ground ball rate. I still think the Dodgers can take advantage of them here, and Vegas would agree. And relative to this slate, it's like where else do you really want to go with bats too much? So anyway, dropping down to Yuli Gurriel. He's on a team I do like quite a bit today. $3,900 should be hitting in the middle of the order for the Astros, which looks like they're going to be one of the better stacks today. Highest team total on the slate currently, and Matthew Boyd. He's not a guy I really like to pick on too much. It's not like he's an absolute scrub or anything. He does have a pretty decent strikeout rate, which can get stacks into trouble if he's on his game, but he will give up quite a bit of power as well. So a good strikeout rate, but a lot of power. So there is some upside here, although it can be a bit dangerous. But looking at his numbers last year in 60 innings, he wasn't very good. He had an ERA close to 7, xFIP closer to 5, 22% K rate, and a 274 ISO given up with a 41% fly ball rate. So there's certainly some home run upside. I think guys like Yuli Gurriel, Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, these guys are some pretty solid plays today, but Gurriel, definitely the cheapest of that group, and he's got some good splits versus lefties, doesn't really strike out too much, which I should probably pull up his splits really quick. So looking at Gurriel's splits versus lefties last season, a 274 ISO, 290 batting average, and only a 7% K rate with a 51% fly ball rate. So Yuli Gurriel, like that price point quite a bit, and he's on a stack that I like a lot today, so Yuli Gurriel checks out as a really strong play in my opinion today. Then $100 cheaper, we have Yoshi here, which I can never really pronounce his last name right, so I won't even try, but it's going to be leading off here versus the righty and Kyle Gibson. Rays didn't really do much whatsoever last night. Dane Dunning and the rest of the Texas Rangers staff, which I thought was kind of odd. I thought they'd have a decent game. I didn't really like them as a stack too much, but I thought there was a couple one-offs that made sense. But Yoshi's fine here versus a righty. His numbers aren't that great. And Cal Gibson isn't the best pitcher in the world. I know he was terrible in his first start, but was great in his last start because I did stack against Cal Gibson in that game. It definitely did not work out whatsoever. But Yoshi's fine leading off here. But for $100 more, I would rather get to Gurriel in my opinion. And then going down to second base, we have Jose Altuve, $5,600. 5,600 bucks. Kind of already mentioned this earlier. I don't love to completely stack against Matthew Boyd, but the way this slate is, looks like it might be something that I do. But he gives up power. He have a decent strikeout rate, but if you're looking at his splits versus right-handed bats last season, it wasn't anything pretty. He had a 5.3 at xFIP with a 7.48 ERA, 304 ISO given up, 43% fly ball rate. Didn't really give up too much hard contact, but a 410 WOBA, 608 slugging. There's definitely upside here for the Houston righties. And Jose Altuve, while his numbers weren't fantastic last year, he's off to a decent start this season. Very expensive, but he is leading off for the Astros. Brandon Lau, $4,500. He's just a fine mid-range second baseman in a beatable matchup versus Cal Gibson, who I just don't think is the best pitcher out there. Well, I don't think he's an absolute trash can by any means. I think he's certainly beatable as well. And Brandon Lau had some pretty strong splits versus right-handed pitching last year. Will strike out quite a bit, as will most of these Tampa Bay Rays, besides a guy like Yandy Diaz. But he had 260 batting average, 238 ISO, 130 WRC plus, and close to a 500 slugging with an OPS close to 8,000 with a double-digit walk rate. So Brandon Lau is certainly in play. He's also eligible in the outfield as well. And one thing I will say is the outfield is pretty bad today, so I'd probably rather play him in the outfield rather than second base just to get a piece in the outfield today because it is an absolute wasteland besides a couple of guys, and you guys will see that in a little bit. Then Gavin Lux, $3,800, kind of one of the cheaper Dodgers, which just put him firmly in play because most of these Dodgers are pretty expensive for the most part. So if you just want cheap Dodgers exposure for a guy that's got some decent splits versus righties, I think he makes sense. Going to be hitting the lower half of the lineup, but still it's hard to pass up that price point when, all the other Dodgers are super expensive on this slate. Going down to third base, speaking of an expensive Dodger, we have Justin Turner above $5,000. I'm probably only going to get here in tournaments because I would prefer if he was going up against a lefty, and I like the lefties better versus Antonio Senzatella, which is what I didn't mention earlier, but Gavin Lux is a lefty, so he's got the platoon advantage there. But Justin Turner, he had a 307 batting average, 376 WOBA with a 150 ISO and a 140 WRC+. So his numbers are fine. If you're stacking the Dodgers, I think he makes sense. But I'd rather play Alex Bregman personally. He's only $5,000, so a little bit cheaper there, and I think he's in an overall better matchup versus Matthew Boyd. I like the price point just a little bit better as well, and he crushes left-handed pitching. Doesn't strike out whatsoever, and he's got a ton of power versus them. Last season, 319 batting average, 255 ISO. In the past, those numbers have been better. 411 on base percentage, only a 7% strikeout rate with a 14% walk rate. So Alex Bregman's going to make contact here, and Matthew Boyd does give up plenty of power to right-handed bats. So Alex Bregman's one of my absolute favorite plays on the slate, and I think they're base we can spend up for. So I'm going to be close to calling Alex Bregman a core play today. I hate to make anything official in the morning, but Alex Bregman's definitely on the top of my charts as of right now. Then Yandy Diaz, $3,500. I think the Rays are an interesting stack today. Their team total doesn't look that great at 4.46, but their bullpen for the Rangers isn't that great. And if they can get the Gibson early, they could definitely put up some runs today. I know it's not a great park for hitting whatsoever in the Trop. I much prefer using pitchers in the Trop rather than bats. I wish this game was in Texas, but I still think the Rays are halfway decent stack, especially compared to the other teams that we have facing some really strong pitchers. So Diaz, he's a guy that won't strike out too much, does walk quite a bit, and hits for a high batting average versus both lefties and righties. So I think he's firmly in play at that cheap price point. And then dropping down to shortstop, we have Corey Seager at $5,500. Very expensive, but I do like lefties versus Antonio Senzatella. And Seager's just one of my favorite guys to play any single time I can fit him in or that he's viable. And I like the lefties better versus Senzatella, and he crushes right-handed pitching. Last season, he was near tops in the league in hard hit percentage, barrels, and all that fun stuff. But specifically, two righties, a 322 batting average, 416 WOBA, 166 WRC plus with a 622 slugging, only a 15% K rate, and a 53% hard contact rate. So if you got the money for Seager, he's in an excellent spot here versus Antonio Senzatella. Carlos Correa, $4,700. The past couple of years, he's actually had better numbers versus righties than he's had versus lefties, but I do like pretty much all the Astros righties here for the most part, just because of the way the slate is. They have a decently high implied team total, the highest actually on the slate currently. That could change throughout the day, but Correa, just a righty here versus Matthew Boyd. He does give up plenty of power versus them, so I think Correa is firmly in play. Did have that late home run last night as well, which was nice for some of my Astro teams. And Willie Thomas, I forget how to say his last name, but at $4,100, I think the Rays are an interesting stack today. I'm not really planting my flag on wanting to stack all these Rays, but the way their price is, and they are facing one of the weaker pitchers in the slate, I think they're in play. I just hate the park that they're in for bats but I guess really all these parks aren't the best for hitting, like Houston and Dodger Stadium. It's not like a hitter's paradise at all. So deal with what we have on DraftKings today, unfortunately. And Willie Thomas, his numbers aren't bad. Looking at his overall splits last season, he had a 222 ISO, 260 batting average, 347 WOBA, 813 on base percentage. Will strike out quite a bit, but I think he's an overall fine option. He can hit both lefties and righties fine. Then dropping down to the outfield, I usually have like a nice laundry list of outfielders, but the outfielders just suck today, in my opinion. I got one good spend up, a couple of good mid-range guys, and then a cheap option for the most part. But I'm hoping some more outfielders pop up for me throughout the day, because right now I am not liking what I am seeing at all. So that's what I'm kind of saying. Maybe we move Brandon Lowe down to the outfield just to get another decent outfielder down there, because there's just not a lot to like today. But anyway, Mookie Betts, $5,900. If you have the money for him, great. If not, it's okay, because I don't think you're going to have to play him. He crushes right-handed pitching and Sensatella. While I prefer lefties versus him, Dodgers are one of my favorite stacks today, and obviously Mookie Betts, if he's in the lineup, he's the best option there. He's their best overall hitter. Although Corey Seager, I think personally today, I like him a little bit more than Mookie Betts. He's also a little bit cheaper as well. But if you got the money for Mookie, it's fine. It's just if you're spending up for pitcher today, I don't think you're going to have $6,000 laying around, especially if you're spending up for third base or shortstop. So Mookie Betts, while he's a fine projection play, you're probably not going to get to him outside of just full-on stacks and fading a top-end pitcher today. Austin Meadows, for reasons I mentioned earlier with these Rays bats, I don't love the Rays today, but they're kind of in an okay spot versus Cal Gibson. I feel like their implied team total should be a little bit higher. I was thinking it was going to be closer to 5 today. Just give more respect for Cal Gibson, who's not a terrible pitcher, but I don't think he's that great either. And Meadows, he hits righties fine. He will strike out quite a bit, but $4,800 should be near the top of the order. I think he makes sense. Yordan Alvarez, $4,700. I'd prefer righties versus Matthew Boyd. I think he's got close to a 30% K rate to left-handed bats, but Alvarez has shown in the past that he can hit both lefties and righties just fine. I'd show you the numbers last year, but it's too small of a sample size to put any data into it. But in 5 plate appearances versus lefties last season, 279 WRC plus, 1,000 slugging, 14 OPS, no strikeouts, and a 400 batting average with a 600 ISO. Super small sample size, can put anything into it. But the year before that, he hit lefties just fine. So I think Yordan Alvarez is certainly a fine play at $4,700, especially if you're stacking the Astros. People are going to probably leave off Yordan because he's a lefty, and people hate lefty on lefty matchups. I do not hate just plugging him in, because if they get to the bullpen at some point, he's going to see a righty, and he can smash righties too. So Yordan's fine in tournaments. Probably wouldn't get there in cash games, though. Going down to some cheaper outfielders, we have AJ Pollock at $3,700. I prefer him versus lefties, but he can hit righties fine. Again, much better numbers versus lefties, though. But if you just want a cheaper Dodgers bat, and plus, the outfielders today are awful, so I can see a lot of people getting to AJ Pollock to pick and just trying to get a cheap piece of a really good offense today. So AJ Pollock is fine in that sense, but outside of that, I wouldn't really target him on most slates versus a righty. Then Nomar Mazara, $2,200. Jake Odorizzi's not a bad pitcher, and this isn't the greatest park for hitting, but at $2,200 should be here in the middle of the order. He's got some power upside versus right-handed pitching. He will strike out a ton. If you want to look at splits last year versus right-handed pitching, struck out 27.6% of the time and only a .063 ISO. Was pretty horrendous last season, but he does have some pop in his bat versus right-handed pitching. And the way this slate is and the way outfield is, I could see quite a bit of people going to Mazara just for the price savings at $2,200. I don't like the Tigers, but he's the one guy that I think might be okay because of the price point and the power upside. With that being said, guys, I think it's going to be it for the video, so I hope it was helpful. And if it was, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me over on social media at ChrisPennell16 on Twitter, CPenn16 over on IG. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below for that. For the optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets, Discord community, all of that fun stuff. We are in there all day just joking around, talking baseball, sweating the games out. Always a good time in Discord. But I think it's going to be it for the video, guys. I'll see you in the next one. And wherever you are, hope the weather is wonderful. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day.